So, as somebody who is primarily a fantasy and science fiction reader, I often find myself reading books that are 1,000+ pages long. You know, the kind of book where you hold it up at night and you fall asleep and drop it on your face. It leaves a nice mark and it definitely wakes you up and you can kind of go back to reading. It's a nice little hack. But as much as I love those books and I love getting immersed in a world that is epic and it takes years and years and years to get a full story because these series take forever to write and, get everything going, I am also a fan of some very short fiction. Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm Tom, and today I'm coming to you with a list of a few books that I really enjoy that I use to break up some of my longer reads that I have done here recently. All of the books on this list are under 190 pages. Most of them are actually even under 100 pages, which I think gives you a nice variety of different things to try out and break up, like I said, some of those longer reads. Not that there's anything wrong with those reads, but this is also a good way to bump up that Goodreads reading number if that's something that you care about. So let's go ahead and start with the first book on my list. And this is coming from one of my all-time favorite authors. And this is definitely not a book that is going to put you in a great mood, or to me, is not a book that is going to make you happy. It is definitely a book that will get the eyes a little misty and kind of hit you in the feels. But that is Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer by Frederick Bachman. Like I said, this is to me, a sad book, but sad in a way that helps you accept some things that happen to most of us. If you have a family member who is being affected by like Alzheimer's or any of those cognitive diseases, you know how difficult it can be. And I think this is a brilliantly told story about the struggle of that and how not only it affects that person, but the people that they are around. And obviously, as with all of the books on this list, with these being very short books, I don't want to say too much about them, but I'm hoping I can say just enough to get you hooked. And like I said, if you just need something to stir up some emotions in you, this is definitely a great one to do it. Next up is a book that unfortunately is only available on audio from Audible, so I know that is definitely a little bit of a red flag and makes it not the most accessible book ever. I will say it was turned into a movie on Amazon Prime, so maybe if you want to check out the movie instead of reading the book. This is called Evil Eye, and this is a 98-minute long audiobook that starts out as kind of a domestic thriller, but then towards the end you start to have some questions about what is actually going on, and I think it devolves, or not it devolves, evolves into quite the epic story in a very short amount of runtime. And with this being an audio exclusive, I will say I think the voice acting and the sounds that are brought into the audio presentation are absolutely fantastic. We are following a character as she falls in love and maybe starts to have some questions about the person she's falling in love with. They seem so perfect, but is there actually something wrong, or is everything as perfect as they think it is? Next up, I have The Mountain Crown by Karen Lwochi, and this is showing that not all fantasy books need to be 800+ pages. This is a book that follows really a tribe and a culture that has been pushed out of its homeland from an invading force, and kind of how the diplomatic relationship between these people and the people who have invaded their land comes and involves, right? And that sounds like something that should be super in-depth and take a lot of page time, but this is one of those stories that's, I think it's 150 pages, and it does so much in that page count. This is one of those books where in 150 pages, I feel like I understand the world, I understand the characters that are involved, and I understand the low level of magic that happens in the story. Dragons are involved in the story, so that is always a plus. And this is kind of my shining example of when I feel like fantasy authors just take the page count that they know that they can get. This is like my example where I'm like, you don't need 450 pages to set the setting in your small village town. You can do so much more with so much less, and I think this is the perfect example of it. This is a beautifully written story. You can treat it as a standalone if you want to. There is a sequel to it, but while they are attached, I think The Mountain Crown itself is a great example of a standalone that isn't a standalone. Next up, I have another book that will definitely hit you in the feels. It is the 89-page novella by Kara Clegan called Foster. And this is really just the story of a young girl meeting a family and kind of growing up over the course of a summer. There's a lot of hidden emotion things that happen in here. And this is a story that at the time I didn't think it was going to have as big as an impact on me, but it has. This is currently for 2025 in my top 5 books of the year that I've read so far. I think I've read about 20 or so. So it's definitely holding its weight up there, and only being under 90 pages, I think that says a lot. Once again, this is a little girl coming to strangers and kind of being a foster child, and it's hard to say much more without really giving away all of the plot points, but you just kind of see that this is maybe a little girl who just needs a little bit more care and love and attention that she has been getting, and you see what happens and how she flourishes as she gets that with her new family. Now, on the complete opposite side of the spectrum of somebody being loving and caring, we have Letters from an Unknown Woman, which is a 45-page, very short story. But this is a story of obsession. We are following a woman who I don't believe is named throughout the entirety of the story. I'm not 100% sure, but she is obsessed with a man that she has seen from afar, right? And it basically follows her life as she does everything possible to get it to revolve around this man. And it is just the descent into madness, but it is told so well. It feels so realistic in just kind of like a completely messed up way. But this is an extremely fun read. And once again, 45 pages. You get from a very early childhood all the way to adulthood with this character, and just all of the crazy things that they have done to be around this person who doesn't even acknowledge them. It's a fascinating tale of obsession, of love, and how toxic a mismatched relationship can be. Next up is another book that's at about that 50-page mark, and this is Hell's Mouth by Giles Christensen. And this is more towards the grim dark side of things. It is a medieval story, and it is actually one that I would love to see be made into a movie. I think the setting, how gritty it is, would be a great A24 film. And basically you are following a group of knights as they go on an adventure. And calling it an adventure is being a little generous and maybe not the best painted picture, but this gets dark and gothic and gritty, and I think it is a great time at 50 pages. There are some fantastic elements, so I could also point at this as being a great fantasy example that doesn't need to be 550 pages, and instead it is just 50. The Willows by Algernon Blackman is another book that I think kind of fits well with Hellmouth, because it is also a very creepy book. If you are somebody who has spent any amount of times out in the woods alone, out in nature alone, and you kind of get those creepy feelings that come in, especially at night. I have always found that for obvious reasons, in the dark, at night, in the woods, when you're hearing things happen, you don't really know what's going on around you. This book captures that feeling better than anything else I think I have ever read. This is also a fairly old book. If I remember correctly, it's from like 1920, maybe even a little bit earlier. So, you can count this as a classic as well. But this is, like I said, a story that takes place on an island, and everything just feels creepy and ominous, and you just feel the pressure of the environment that these two people are in, and it kind of just keeps you on the edge of your seat, creeps you out just enough to keep going and finishing the story. And now it is time for the two longest books on this list. The first one comes in at 175 pages, and that is called Snow Country. And this really just follows a man who meets a geisha in Japan, and kind of their relationship as it evolves and moves on to its different stages. And the reason I wanted to put this one on the list is, while it is a little bit longer, it's getting closer to that 200-page mark, I do think it has a very beautiful writing in it. I remember being kind of transported to this just beautiful countryside. And while, yes, the character relationships are really kind of what moves the story along, this is a story that the writing itself actually pulled me in more than a lot of other things. In a strange way, it reminded me of Hemingway's writing. If you have read anything from him, it felt sparse, but also detailed, and gave you enough details to feel like you're there, and just kind of go on this, twisting and turning love story, if you want to call it that. And then the last book on this list, this is the longest book, and it's a little bit of a wild card. It comes in at about 190 pages, depending on which version you get, but that is Casino Royale by Ian Fleming. This is the first James Bond novel. I will say just right off the bat, any of these James Bond novels written by Ian Fleming has some problematic material in it. They have not aged well, especially when it comes to things like misogyny, stereotypes, negative stereotypes really, and not just about women and minorities, but literally about any kind of group of people that was not somebody who was British, basically. But I will say, this is a fun spy thriller. It kicks off one of the greatest, this is one of my favorite series of all time. And it kicks off one of the best movie franchises of all time as well. And with some of the things that I've heard about going on with the movie rights, who knows when we will actually get another movie. So I think reading Casino Royale is a great change of pace, and it's still short enough where you get a full story, but you might also learn something about James Bond and how different the character in the book and in the movie are. So I would love to hear some of the short reads that you use to break up some of your longer reads, or maybe you're just somebody who only really reads short stuff. I would love to hear those down below in the comments, or you can come hang out in the Discord as well. But I hope you enjoyed this list. Like I said, love to hear your suggestions down below in the comments, and remember, read what you want when you want.